on the flip side, be totally willing to say, hey, I was wrong. I made the wrong assumption here. Thank you for educating me on that. I didn't know that that was difficult because in this situation, it doesn't work that way. It's different in the shop than it is in the field because, yeah, you have a crane here and you don't there. So what changes, or can we even do this here if we don't have the right tooling? Because then again, we're putting somebody in a situation to make a decision on how to get the work done.
Ashley Mckie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm really excited to be here.
You've got a tremendous amount of experience in the space of health and safety. You were recognized as a top woman in safety for 2023, 2024, and 2025 by Canadian Occupational Safety Magazine. You were also the director of health and safety for Venturis Capital, looking over 60 branches. So quite a lot of individuals that you were responsible for in that program there. I could obviously give your introduction, but I think the best person for that is probably yourself. If you just want to give us a rundown of who you are, your background, and how you got to where you are today, that'd be great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so currently I am the Director of Health and Safety for Inland Truck and Equipment. So we have operations in both Canada and the US, and we are the second largest Kenworth dealer in the world. So we have 46 locations. The 46th is just about to open, and it's been a really great time over here. Prior to all of that and my experience at Venturis, I was in forestry. So that's how I started off in safety. Was I worked in sawmills, and that was where it kicked off. And 15 years later, it's going really well.
Yeah, I'm curious. I talk to safety professionals that manage larger organizations and also smaller ones. What are some of those, I guess, unique factors that go into a safety program at scale? So when you're looking at larger safety programs, what are some of those keys to make sure that it grows effectively?
Absolutely. So, one of the first things that you need to identify, obviously, when you're managing a corporate program, is your compliance pieces. So, first and foremost, you have to make sure that you are complying with the rules of the land, wherever those may be. So, I've managed up to 12 jurisdictions at a time on both sides of the border. And my approach has always been to take the highest standard of anywhere we operate and then apply it to everybody. Because what we typically find with legislation is that once it's come out somewhere, everybody kind of tends to elevate to that standard at some point. So what that allows is, rather than managing, say, 12 different programs and different rules wherever someone may be, you just have a program that even when people are moving between jurisdictions, they're going to be in compliance, they're going to know what the rules are, and we're all operating in the same playbook. It makes it really challenging if you have one rule here and a different rule there. Your supervisors or your workers can compare notes and go, well, how come you have to do this and we don't, or those types of things. And there's just really not usually a great reason for that. If compliance standards are always the bare minimum. We always say that regulations are written in blood. So something bad has happened enough times that we have to have a rule about it that employers must follow. So if that's kind of the bare minimum, that should be your bare minimum across the board, because what can happen in Ontario can very easily happen in California. Humans are kind of the same wherever you go.
Right. So there's sort of a baseline fundamental. You need to apply it to all different sites, not just kind of pick and choose. Is that
Definitely. I think, again, when you pick and choose, you leave that room for interpretation between your audience, your internal customers. So whether that be supervision or frontline. It just makes it easier when we all are working from the same playbook. And then again, for maintenance and for compliance, you don't want to have one rule here and one rule there. When you're working in a large organization, often there's legal ramifications, right? You can get sued or those types of things. So if you're not very defensible if you have one rule somewhere And maybe that rule would have prevented whatever's happened where there's potentially a legal matter. And you didn't apply that there. You knew well enough to do it here. Why wouldn't you also do it there if it was a smart safety measure? Ultimately, especially in Canada, it's very clearly stated that we're required to do everything reasonably practicable to ensure the safety of our workers. So if you know that it's a good safety measure in uh, Saskatchewan, you should also apply that in BC because it's a reasonable measure to apply to your workforce.
So you're not necessarily just meeting the bare minimum of what works in one place. It's, hey, how can we take the best of from the different spots here and kind of make something that works across the board? To your point, people are the same in wherever you go, right?
Legislation is also very slow to change. It has a lot of processes to go through. We, as employers, have a lot more flexibility and can move more quickly in implementing change than, say, a regulator can sometimes. So, if you know something is good practice or required in another area, bring it to all your areas because it's likely been gone through a lot of paces to get there. For instance, on the west coast of the U.S., we see a lot of working in the heat regulation coming on board the last few years, and that's great. Even here in Canada, we typically don't have higher temperatures, but we have these heat domes now and those types of things. So how do we plan accordingly? How do we train our workers to recognize heat illness? How do we make sure that they have the right tools and resources to, or scheduling even, to make sure that they are successful in working in a different environment than maybe is typical, that's short and extreme, but present?
Yeah, why start from scratch when you can look at those that have already been successful in their programs, dealing with those situations that may have already come up for them?
Or are more common for them as well, right? So, Arizona is an area that I work in, and obviously they're very well versed in how to work in the heat, and it's a more common thing. It happens every year. It's expected, versus when you go further north, it's less often that we experience that, but the methods still work.
I'm I'm curious, working for a larger organization, how do you really build that influence or that ability to change a safety culture when there's so many moving parts and there's so many people that are, kind of, one talks to the other and the word kind of moves top down from leadership. How do you make sure that that message is actually getting across?
Absolutely. So, direct communication wherever possible. And just to backtrack on that a little bit, as I've recently come into a new role. So, the first thing I did was basically nearly a whole company tour, making sure that I was, face to face with our frontline workers, our frontline supervisors, who are the people actually doing the work, because there's going to be norms and standards, and they're not all written down, and um, they're not always a set standard across the organization. Sometimes we solve the same problem, but different ways at different branches, and that might make sense for their operation, and that's great. But how do we take those best practices and bring them all back? And understanding first and foremost, how is work being done today before you start kind of dictating down to people, here's how you're going to do it now because I said so. So I think that that's really important, is first and foremost understanding where people are at today, seeking to understand how are we where we are, what are we happy with, what are we uncomfortable with, what is something that's a problem that we feel we need to solve more urgently, like what is going to make an impact to those frontline people who are kind of the most vulnerable when it comes to safety because they're doing the hard work. They're one of our sayings at Inland is that we're the hard work behind the hard work. So our technicians who are on the front line and our parts people who are out in their trucks delivering every day, who have all these safety risks in their day-to-day work, what matters to them is kind of the first and foremost thing to nail down. Um, and yeah, then if you can solve some of the problems that people would love to have solved, that's a great way to get buy-in. It's a great way to make sure that we're working towards collective goals, not just what I think is important from looking at it. Like, you can't manage safety from an ivory tower. It's very important that yeah, exactly. So it's just really ineffective if you actually don't know what's going on, especially when your operations are so spread out geographically. There's going to be regional differences and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think first seek to understand what's going on, and then make sure that when you create a solution for those problems, that it is super clear what you want people to do. Not It's not often that, again, humans being human, that they are trying to willfully be difficult, or that they're very, all of our people are very smart people. So they're trying to solve a problem that's in front of them in their day-to-day work in the best way they can with the tools, education, supports, whatever, that are in front of them in that moment, right? So um, if you can make it easier to do the right thing, then it just makes it easy for everybody. The example I love to use is in my garage, I have kind of a pantry extra storage. That's kind of where like the Costco groceries go and that kind of thing, right? The bigger stuff that you don't haul into the kitchen. And if I need something, I'm not very tall. If I need something that's on the top shelf, I have a little step stool thing, like kind of this ladder that folds out. And if my husband takes that to the shed in the backyard, am I going to look in the shed, or do I start looking for a box because I need to grab something real quick, right? So that is normal human nature. So how do you plan for that? You get a second ladder thing for the shop, and then you have the right tool there to make the right decision quickly when you need to just do something, because that's the mode we're in. We're going to do a thing. Oh, the tool I need isn't here. What else can I use that's readily available and keeps me on the timeline in my brain? So I really try to look at what we can do to set people up to make sure that they have the right tools, education, support, whatever that is, to make the right decision. So when you're going to roll something out that's new, make sure that they have the tools, knowledge, and the system supports them in making the right decision.
And a lot of it may kind of seem common sense or it makes sense when you say it, right? But I think in a lot of cases it's not implemented often, right? People don't do it. So it can be something that's so, like, there's two things that stood out to me here. One is, you said speaking to the front line, right? So actually engaging, getting that feedback from them, and then learning, okay, what are the solutions that make sense? And then actually reducing the friction there so that the solutions that you implement are easy to keep up and keep doing, right? So it's got to be huge.
If you like, one of the things I really enjoyed coming into inland is that when I walk into a parts warehouse, we have tons of carts and dollies and a forklift and all these things to make lifting easy, to make transporting parts easy. So you don't often see people walking with a big armful of parts because they stick everything on a cart, and those carts are well maintained and that sort of thing. So it's things like that that make good decisions easy to make, because the tool's right there, it's well maintained, it works, it fits what I need to do. And then I'm not, again, that kind of like get it done mentality that is so easy for us to get into, especially if there's any sort of production pressure. It's a busy day, or we didn't sleep well, or you got to factor for human factors. We all have those things. We can all be distracted. We're coming into the holidays, so we're thinking about the holiday plans, or I've got to get this toy that my kid wants that's impossible to order on the internet. Um, but yeah, it's really easy for us to, again, get distracted, or to have a situation where we're looking for an alternate. So if we make it easy to not look for the alternate because the good solution is right there, the world's an easier place. So I think whenever you're designing any sort of solution for anybody, you want to think about reality. We're not machines. We're not going to execute task A the same way 972 times in a row. Like, we're not built that way. It's not how humans are. So keep the human factor in whatever you're doing when you're creating systems, policies, training, any of those things. Like, don't give somebody a 4-hour training for something that can be 20 minutes. it's Length is not your friend there. We all have an attention span this long now. So
I think everyone can think of a time in their mind when they were in a training that was longer than it needed to be. And it's not productive for anybody, really. At the end of the day, there's no, you might get less benefit from it, really, at the end of the time. Like, when you leave that, you're begging to leave that training, right?
it's the high points. Give me the high points and something to reference back to if I have a more specific question. But adult learners, what do they need to know? What applies to what they're doing? And I assure you, it's not writing into your policy for compliance, refer to Act section 7.2-5 in something that they don't even know where to access. Yeah, just make it make sense, make it easy to do the right thing in the practical world. And then I guess, yeah, we touched on training. So with training, short and sweet. What do we need to know? We don't need to, belabor points. It's usually something that they're interacting with normally, unless it's of course like fall protection. There's standards there, uh, but if you're just talking about, I don't have a great example off the top of my head, but it's something more simple that is just here's the quick hits of what you need to know. Keep that short and sweet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you brought up another point here too, which was pressures, competing business pressures. Obviously, every business, the goal is to make profit, right? Fundamentally, how, especially in a larger organization where that pressure can, mount, how do you really balance the two where you're making procedures that make sense, policies that make sense, and also, keeping in mind the business needs to, get the project done, get everything working quick and on time? How do you really make sure those two are kind of in line?
Absolutely. That is a struggle for everybody. I often say I don't know many safety programs where people are saying, we just have too much time and too many resources. That's a real problem we're experiencing. I don't hear that when I go to conferences, surprisingly enough. So yeah, I think it's kind of a triage system, right? Like what are the big scary things that we need to make sure we do right because the consequence is too high. So invest in those accordingly. And then are there things that are nice to have? And how can we tie initiatives together? Like I love when there's a solution that ties multiple things together. So it's a good cost effective use. Um, and again, prioritize. Sometimes we have to say, okay, we can do these four things now, and these two are going to have to wait till the next quarter or wait till the next budget. Um, but again, you've got to kind of weigh that risk. Is somebody going to get hurt? Or is this something that's just a due diligence measure that, while important, is more of a nice to have than a mandated thing? And that comes with program maturity too, right? So you're going to have things that as you grow, maybe you had to invest in a big tool and outfit all of your locations with it. When you've got multiple sites, that's often a thing that happens. Um, so you have to make a one-time investment maybe that, and then after that it's kind of maintenance as things wear out. You're going to replace a few here and there, but for the most part that's done. But that's a big budget item. Versus something that's an ongoing cost like a subscription or a training package or whatever the thing is. So you have to kind of identify those correctly. Like, is this a one-time big ticket item or is this something that's ongoing? So I have to factor this into my budgets for future use. Does this make sense? Are we getting the right value out of it? You always want to look at kind of your ROI on anything, right? So if somebody, I mean, in safety, that's what we have to consider. Could somebody die if we don't do this? Then the price becomes less important to doing the right thing. Versus, again, is this a nice to have? And we will get there when the time is right, but we've got these other rocks we have to move first.
So you're really going through and prioritizing, and that's a good, a pretty easy prioritization. Could somebody, potentially have a fatal incident if we don't proceed with this, right? Well, clearly that's going to the top of the list. So that's an easy kind of exercise to really, get your top line priorities in place. Um, Once you have those going, and let's say the safety program is running well, and now you're in a place where, total reportable incidents are down, everything's looking good, and you're you might have complacency start to set in. How do you get ahead of that and avoid that happening when you're in a high performance safety environment?
So hard, because again, that is super human nature to be like, I know what I'm doing. Where I am now, we have so many people who have been with us for decades, and that's amazing. It's really actually impressive how many people we have who have been here for literal decades, like whole careers. It's amazing. So I think helping people have a continued mindset of growth and evolution and those kinds of things is really important, because if we get into that, this is the way we've always done things and this is just how we do it and it never ever changes. I think you need to continue to review and revise. Technology changes, tooling changes, training that our apprentices are coming with changes. There's always changes. So I think that, again, that continuous growth, continuous improvement kind of mindset really helps. And if we're always um, pushing forward to make things better, I feel like that kind of helps uh, battle complacency, because we're used to change, we're used to thinking, we're used to being kind of aware of our surroundings rather than just kind of settling in, because safety is never done. The regulations are going to change. Again, tooling, technology, um, just different things that are available to us are always going to change. So when we keep putting new things in front of the audience stays engaged, right? And that's our customers. We're here to make sure that our frontline people and their support networks all go home safe every day. Um, I think that's it. Like, just keeping things moving so that it always feels like it's changing. So we pay attention. When things get stale and we think we've just got it down and we've nailed it, that's when complacency can really set in. I think also staying aware of, like, kind of your critical tasks, things that are the big deals. Like, do we retrain annually? Do we change that training so that they're not like, oh yeah, I've seen this 7 times. They're not paying attention, right? Like, don't do that to your people. Do a revamp of it. Make sure there's a voiceover, add a different quiz or a different activity within it to, like, give you a different learning style to kind of grasp the information, so that it's not like, oh yeah, like, here comes our annual bullying training. I've heard this before. I can tell it, like, don't do that. Try to switch it up wherever you can, because we do have a lot of control over those types of items. And especially now, there's so many great tools for course development and different interactions. And I mean, we use Biz, so we have all kinds of things that we can upload into our program and deploy really easily to our audiences. So keep it engaging and consider how you would like to learn. Kind of same thing when I go to my garage. How am I going to make the right choice? I'm going to set myself up for that. Set your people up the same way to make sure that they can engage with the content, take something out of it, involve them in the development of it, use actual examples of incidents that have happened. Like, hey, we had an incident in 2024 where XYZ happened, and that's how that relates to this. This is why this training is important. Like, this happened here. It's not some hypothetical thing or some theoretical thing from a textbook or legislation. Here's how it actually applies to us in our day to day, and here's how it went wrong one time. So we never want that to happen again. So keep that history alive as well, to make sure that we understand that this does apply to us. I think that's important as well.
Love that. That's a phenomenal idea. Look at the stories around you, look at the learnings that you can pull from in your immediate environment and bring that in. And then also, I mean, for most people, I think this is just human psychology. If you see something that you can relate to, you're going to be pulled into it a little bit more, engaged a little bit more. So if we can do that with our safety programs, I think that's huge. And another point you made there was your customers are the employees, right? Of the safety program, the customers are the employees. So how do we get their buy-in, right? How do we earn that? And I think revamping the teachings and the trainings is huge. I'm curious, what have been kind of the biggest learning moments for you over your career, right? Looking back at it's you've had a wide breadth of experience. I'm curious, what have been those moments where you took away something and were like, oh, okay, this is helpful, and I wish other people would have known this. This episode is powered by BIS Safety Software, one of the leading safety and compliance software applications on the market today. The team at BIS has rolled out a powerful new reporting dashboard that makes it easy to track, measure, and interpret your safety performance. From monitoring near misses to calculating TRIF, you can turn everyday form data into meaningful insights, displayed through flexible charts, counters, and trends. With customizable widgets, advanced metrics, and permission-based access, it's a smarter way to stay informed and ahead. See everything they have to offer at bissafety.ca.
I think that one of the biggest things is having a network. I feel like in safety, and I was not a natural networker. I was, if I'd go to a conference or go to a course, it was like, okay, I'm here for my objective, and then I'm going on, and I've really learned to embrace that because in safety, we are generalists a lot of the time. Like there's obviously our specific specialties, like you have your industrial hygienists and those kinds of things, ergonomists, those people who are really specialized and have this great specialty behind them. But for a lot of us, we deal with, everything from our environmental quality, health, safety, when there's a pandemic, when there's a natural disaster, when there's all kinds of these different big rocks to deal with, like these big items to deal with. And sometimes you don't know until you're in it that this is going to be part of your practice for the next 6 months or whatever, right? Um, and while education certainly gives us a lot of pointers and guidance and that sort of thing, sometimes there's situations that you don't know how you're going to deal with them until you are in it. And there's a lot of learning and growth. And I always, when I'm in those situations, um, I try to whoever's in my team at the time, like we're all going to learn this together. We really, the pandemic was a good example of that. Here's a new fun thing that we do. Let's go figure this out, and we're all going to take this learning, and now we've got it. But additionally, having that network to leverage where somebody may already have that experience or may have already gone through this more specific situation than you've broadly tackled before and can kind of give you some support and some guidance or even just a sounding board as you're talking through what you think you're going to do about it. Um, yeah, I'm very blessed to have an amazing professional network of people that I reach out to and that reach out to me. And sometimes when somebody reaches out to you with a question, you learn a lot. You're like, oh yeah, that's a great question. Like, how would I deal with that? Um,
Even if that situation hasn't come up for you yet, you can, it might very well in the future, right? So that why not get some of that learning ahead of time?
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that something I wish I would have embraced earlier was definitely networking and really kind of minding my professional network. And I mean, a lot of those people have become great friends now, and I'm so grateful. Um, it's good to kind of, nerd out with your buddies on what you do all day. And sometimes also, like, safety can feel kind of daunting and a little bit dark sometimes, right? Like, we're dealing with what went wrong quite often all day. And we're trying to be proactive, and you feel like you've done all these things, and then something still goes wrong, and it can be challenging, right? So I think that that's another part of it too, is to make sure that you kind of come up for air once in a while and get outside of your bubble and outside of your world and look at why you do this and remember that you are making progress and kind of share in the victories or cheer somebody else's victory on to remember, like, okay, yeah, we are progressing because that's really important too. We've got to embrace the passion that is generally what people bring to safety and focus on the full picture, not just like, oh no, another incident came in, or oh no, there was another injury at work today. Or oh, there was a policy violation or whatever the thing is, right? Like it can be very easy for your inbox to fill up with those kinds of things. So celebrating the wins, having a network to do it that with who gets what you do, I think is really important.
A little bit of group therapy, right? In a way. But it never hurts, never hurts. But it's a good point, right? You're dealing with a lot of, like you said, negative situations, right? Your work begins where the mistakes sort of start, right? Um, and
We love it when it's quiet, but we usually, knock on some wood, but it's when there's no compliance issues and there's no injuries, like that's a sign of a great safety program, but it's understated, right? Like everyone's like, oh, you kind of move on to your next project. You're like, oh, we've got some time, we'll work on this, but you don't necessarily celebrate like, hey, wait a second, it's quiet because it's good, right? It's very opposite to a lot of other kind of metrics where just being quiet is great and sometimes rare.
yeah, and and this was something else that I heard recently. It's just because there's no injuries that are happening or there's no recordable injuries doesn't mean that there's gaps that aren't there, right? You might also be getting, so there's this two-sided coin where, yeah, it could be great, but then you're also kind of like, well, are we missing something? Right?
And that's where safety never ends, right? Like you're continuously assessing. And again, that maturity, you kind of deal with what you have to as a foundation. And then your maturity allows you to look deeper and deeper and deeper and hopefully, refine and make systems better and involve people more and create that more mature program where there are less gaps.
It makes complete sense, right? And kind of constantly evolving and not stopping in one spot. So the point about, finding those that mentors, I guess, in safety is huge. If you had to pick two mentors that you look, obviously it's a tough choice, but two people that you look up to, right? When you go for advice, who would those be?
Goodness, my favorite sounding boards are Amy Arsenault and Tanya Steele. Like they have been great sounding boards, great cheerleaders, amazing friends. Um, Great supporters and pointing out like because sometimes again you're like, oh, am I doing the right thing? And we stress about these things, and there's only so many hours in a day and so many resources that we get, and we have to make decisions. And just having again those people to really support you in and again cheer you on. Like I am so grateful for both of those women. They have been huge. They've opened doors for me and connected me with other people and vice versa. Like it's just been really a very fulfilling relationship professionally and personally. That was an easy one.
No, I could tell your eyes lit up right away, and that just. But I think it speaks to how powerful that sort of thing can be, right? No matter what industry you're in, right? No matter what space, it really does help to start building that professional network. And like you said, right, it might not be your thing to go out and network, or you might not feel super comfortable at first, but I think the value is something that accrues over time, I imagine, as you start doing that sort of thing more and you kind of work your way further in your career, you'll sort of realize how valuable those connections actually can be, right? It's not just you make it and then, okay, well, I've got one person I know in safety, but you gotta you gotta kind of keep building that up, right? And then you've got a full contact list.
It grows too. Like I'll know somebody who's going to a conference and I'll be like, "Oh, you got to find Amy or you've got to talk to these people." Or Tanya's emceeing, of course, because she always is. So go say hi. And I get the same thing when maybe I'm speaking at an event as well. And they're like, "Hey, Amy told me I had to come see you and I just wanted to introduce myself." And it's so great to kind of leverage each other's networks as well and connect people that way and be like, "Oh yeah, hey, you're in this. I need you to meet this person over here." And it's really it's nice to be able to give back at this stage, I guess, because I am fortunate to know more people now. I do a lot of professional volunteering. I've done that throughout my career, so that gives me an opportunity again to give back, but also to make those connections in maybe industries that I wouldn't normally interact with through my work. So again, you kind of just develop this fabric of diversity around you that's really just so rich and valuable and enjoyable to have those other safety friends around.
And like you said, kind of giving back to the community in a way is a huge part as well, especially when you have those connections and you're speaking at the different events. I'm curious, um, what we talked about networking being something that's very important. What are some other skills that if you had to talk to a younger safety professional who's like just coming in and even speaking to yourself, if you could go back and speak to a young Ashley and say, hey, you're getting into the safety business, this is a skill set that I would focus on developing. What would that be?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, remember humans are human. Humans are not machines. They will not follow the procedure 100%, 100% of the time. Um, so build for that, right? Like be aware that humans are going to be human. So, and your legislation is going to tell you things and your regulations and that kind of thing. You're going to have all these points that you need to incorporate into your program. But first and foremost, we're designing it for the human. We're not designing it to, you know, potentially defend ourselves in court one day. It should be a functional program for that frontline person to be successful, set them up for success. If they had nothing else, and this is something that Tanya did a great talk on a while ago, is if they had nothing else but this policy, could they reasonably execute on exactly what they need to do? And even if they didn't love it, could they do it, right? Like, does it tell them everything that they need to know without telling them to go and reference 12 different things and that they might not even have access to? It might be a paid standard that you're referencing that they can't access. So, first of all, design your program for the people to be successful. We often have to consider legislation so heavily in what we do, and that is important, but there is a way to do it that is more nuanced than the book says, so you must. Like, just take a look at that. And then be curious. Like, always, first and foremost, seek to understand. Understand why this person made this decision. When you're doing an incident investigation, for example, Joe person did not choose to cut his finger this day. Like this, that was not the goal of the day. So what was the purpose? What decision drove that? And did the system allow for that decision to be made? Because there wasn't a better tool available, or there wasn't better training, or there wasn't mentorship, or there whatever the thing is. So be curious, know that people aren't out to, harm themselves in their day. Like, if the answer is pay more attention in your root causes, and you're seeing that time after time, it's time to review your causation. And really, when you learn why things happen, you can improve things to prevent them. It's not the human was human and they were wrong, and okay, good, move on to the next one, right? And I think that that's becoming more mainstream thought, which is important. But yeah, be curious, figure out why somebody is making the choice that they're making, because again, it's often that it was the easy thing to do, or I had this time pressure, or I thought that was the right way to do it, or this procedure is garbage and I read it and it said you might do this or you might do that. And so I chose this and it was the wrong one for this. Like, just what can you do to set people up for success first and foremost? So be curious about why they do the things the way they do. If you don't know, because often in safety we are maybe more technical, or like, again, from a theory standpoint on a lot of these hazards and controls, understand how work is being done and incorporate that into your solutions. So if you don't know, ask the people who know. They're experts, just like us in safety. We're so excited to, you give us a soapbox, we'll stand on it and talk till our,
That's why we set the podcast up. That's why.
People are known for being chatters. So if we don't, like, let them shine, let them tell you about why they do things the way they do, or what would make their work better, or what their experience is, and these types of things. Because that, builds trust, it builds relationship. You don't need to know everything. And I think that a lot of newer safety professionals or safety practitioners often come in and they've got their, now it's more common that they're coming in with this great education, which was kind of less common decades before. People are actually coming into safety on purpose, not just stumbling into it and starting with an education before maybe experience. And that's great. That's great. They have a lot of knowledge to come in and do things, but never overlook the people. And just because your book says isn't necessarily the right solution. Understand how things are, understand what is available, or ask why. Like, if I think that this is the way to solve a problem, and I put it out to the field and I'm like, are you crazy? You can't do that. Like, this doesn't work for these reasons. Make sure that you've built enough trust that they'll tell you that, instead of them signing the paper and saying, yes, they've received it, and then they're going to toss it in the trash on the way out of the toolbox. You want to make sure that you encourage that environment where people can speak up and say this doesn't work, and that comes from, before you send out that policy or procedure or whatever thing you want them to do, having asked some people about how does this actually work, and why would this be, like, why doesn't the manufacturer cover this in their instructions? How do you deal with that? That is something we run into as well. So it can't just be because the book says we do this. Find out how it actually applies to people, because you can be a little bit creative. Some of our regulations are obviously very specific and prescriptive and that sort of thing. Great, no problem. But a lot of them aren't, especially when you cross over into the US. So can we solve this to ensure that the company is secure, the organization is secure because we've met our obligations under the law, but then can the worker reasonably, the employee reasonably execute on that and work safely in their day?
Yeah, there's so many great points in there. I think being curious is one that stood out to me. I At the same time, you have to kind of want to find the answers, I guess, which is can be maybe a problem in and of itself, right? Maybe everyone wants to kind of hide their eyes a little bit. But once you ask those questions, I bet, especially if you're coming to the front line, they're going to have answers for you. Like you said, these are experts that you're talking to, and nobody goes in trying to cut their finger that day, right? There's very rarely, right? It's always going to be, what were we trying to get done here, and what procedures weren't in place for that not to happen.
And sometimes that gives you a great opportunity to educate. Like I've had a worker say to me, well, I don't need to shave my beard other than when I get my fit testing done, because when my beard grows back, my respirator is still 95% effective. And I'm like, absolutely it is not. Like that's really interesting that that is like truly your belief, that it is still 95% um, protecting you.
Where did that number come from?
That's super interesting. Let's discuss that further, right? Rather than saying like, oh yeah, these guys just don't care or whatever, like making assumptions about what's going on. And that's often wrong. So like, yeah, be curious, seek to understand why are we making the decisions we're making? What drives that? What are we missing in maybe an education, or why haven't we spelled out exactly the right way to do this? They're guessing. Um, yeah, provide the right tools.
And it's not hard. It's just it requires a certain amount of discipline and willingness to kind of go out there and make it happen.
Totally. And on the flip side, be totally willing to say, hey, I was wrong. I made the wrong assumption here. Thank you for educating me on that. I didn't know that that was difficult, because in this situation, it doesn't work that way. It's different in the shop than it is in the field, because yeah, you have a crane here and you don't there. So what changes, or can we even do this here if we don't have the right tooling? Because then again, we're putting somebody in a situation to make a decision on how to get the work done. Um, and as far as they're concerned, they're assigned the job and the job is to get done. But empower your workers to be able to stop and say, no, that I can't do this, because we've had those conversations, right? And we understand that it's not get it done at the risk of, it's not get it done even though, those types of things aren't part of how we work.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's not the statement that we want to be making, right? But sometimes when you visit sites, I'm sure can seem like that, right? Just yeah, yeah, walking around and kind of getting that intuitive feeling. How do you kind of build that? You mentioned that not you should, especially with newer safety professionals, they might be coming in with a lot of education, right? And a lot of procedures based thinking, which is phenomenal, right? I'm always constantly impressed by the number of PhDs that I speak to on this show. That's great. How do you kind of build that intuitive feeling for what's really working, what's not, and where do we need to kind of deviate from just what the book says, if you know what I mean?
Feedback, you have to work with your customer to what's working, what's not. Like we've just been going through a huge launch and a lot of change in this last 18-19 months that I've been working with Inland, and it's been fantastic. Everybody's really embraced change, but they're also very willing to tell me if they're like, I don't think it works that way, or we really wish it would do this, or those kinds of things, right? And that is so important. Again, be that person that they can come to and say that, because if you just say, nope, this is the way it's done, you're going to shut that down. You're not going to get the feedback. So, personality matters in that for sure. And like I even say, when we have a monthly joint health and safety committee meeting, so everybody is welcome from all of our locations to come and join and talk about what's new and exciting this month in safety. Maybe get some coaching on a skill that we're noticing that maybe people need, or some information about like, why do we do this? We've been doing this for 75 years and nobody knows why. At this point, it's kind of eroded away. So let's remind ourselves, why do we do these things? Um, and oh, back up. So it's really important to engage your audience. And I always say when I'm launching a new tool, I'm like, if you hate this, please tell me. If this doesn't work, or you're like, this lady's crazy, she doesn't understand what we're doing. We do our best to design what we think will work from the feedback we have, but all of this is changeable. Like, let's figure out what works for us. I've managed other programs, and not all of those things and learnings, even though it can be very similar industry, are the right fit for a different environment. So never think you have the end all be all of a solution. That's really important because, again, tools, technology, knowledge, research, all of these things change and grow. So we have to be willing to adapt with things as they come. There might be a better way to solve that problem now, or there might be, or maybe that old way we've always done it is stale and redundant now because we've done something else in our program that this doesn't matter anymore. Just get it out of here. This is way better. Um, so yeah, it's really important just to kind of keep learning and growing, and keep I always call them like our internal customers. So always keep your customer involved and engaged, and um, I always say, we have no ego. If you hate something, please tell us. Like, it's okay. Like, as long as we get to the best right thing for us. And that might change in a year or three, right? So continue to maintain and evaluate, and never think that anything's written in stone. I always say that when we're looking at anything. Nothing is written in stone. If there's a better way out there, or something has changed, or we have access to something different, let's incorporate that in and make sure that we review things, at least like in at least every 3 years. Everything should get a look and say, is this still right? Does this still fit, or has something changed? And I think that, again, that keeps that complacency from coming in as well, because when you review things and relaunch them and that type of thing, it keeps everybody engaged and moving forward. And I think it's really important to not assume that even when you have a workforce with a lot of long-term employees, that they remember everything you told them 5 years ago. Like, keep bringing up the important things without drowning them in stuff that's not important to their day to day.
No, it makes so much sense. And again, like you said, these are your customers, and even just taking that metaphor further, right? Would you sell your customers, or try to sell your customers, things that they don't want or won't buy or won't? And in this case, the buy-in, right? So are they filling out their FLHAs? Are they filling out all of their forms, right? If they're not, and they don't think it makes sense, well, how do we create a product that is actually going to earn the buy-in? So I think that's it's brilliant. It makes complete sense. And you mentioned technology as well there, right? So there's new technologies coming up all the time, right? I'm curious, what on the horizon is kind of piquing your interest? What out there do you see with like AI and all of this? I mean, there's so much in the space. I'm really curious what you guys are implementing.
So I love AI for the fact that a lot of good observations come from analyzing large data sets. And the more history you have on hand from your organization, the better analysis you can do. And that can take hours and hours and hours of your time. But now you can throw it into AI and be like, okay, look for trends, look for anything that, yeah, for trends and for things that stand out as maybe something that might be missed. And I've spent many hours in pivot tables trying to do that work manually, so I'm really excited that we can kind of get some assistance on that. And then again, follow the data, be curious about it, ask more questions, seek to understand. um, Additionally, I think that on the training front, like the L&D front, I think that we have so much agility now because of what's available for course development, for different learning tools, for the things that used to take us a long time to develop as a course and record, and like all these things that were kind of clunky and maybe more difficult than they are now. We need to lean into that, because that's how we can again make training or whatever information we need to get out more interesting and more relevant and more interactive, and therefore more memorable. Right? Because that's the point. We don't want to give people 20 training courses a year and they don't know what they are at the end of the day. And again, back to that attention span piece. Like, we are not the workforce that is coming. and is starting to be in the workspace, they are not coming with a longer attention span, and we are all collectively losing our attention span because of quick hits of information all over the place. So we have to kind of compete with that and join that that is the way things are. Lean into micro learning, lean into alternative ways of presenting information than we have previously. So I think that all those tools are out there. They're making it easy. You can have like I'm not a programmer, I'm not a developer, I'm not a any of those things. I'm a subject matter expert, and I can know what I want in it. But now there's all these great tools to take and to take those um, learning principles and execute them to your audience, and that it can be generated so quickly, so you can be a little more responsive. Maybe like before, we used to have a course in development for say like 3 months easily. By the time we had a script, made the slides, did the voiceover, got it through approvals, like all these things. And now there's so many tools that just speed that up, so again we can communicate at the speed of business, not have these big legs. Love that.
Makes complete sense. And the point about, we do have a younger workforce coming in now, right? The attention spans are lower. I think we've all seen that. I myself have noticed my own attention span for content.
100%.
I'll be watching a YouTube video and I'll have YouTube shorts on my phone and I'll be scrolling through the YouTube shorts while watching a so there's a level of dopamine, and obviously we have to get the content in there and make sure that we're still covering everything. But to your point that, and this kind of ties back earlier, how are we actually engaging everyone with the content, right? How does it actually apply to them, right? Are we getting feedback? Are we implementing incidents that might have happened on site, right? I'm curious, now that we have sometimes 3-4 generations in one workplace, how do you keep the older generations engaged when especially with technology? How do you kind of earn that buy-in when there might be a little bit of hesitation there? Um,
So we've been going through that pretty heavily this year. Again, lots of long-term employees and that kind of thing. And I think that the most important part is that when you're designing anything, really ask, does this need to be here? And what can we automate? And what can we make simple? And then sometimes it even comes down to like the device choice versus like a phone versus a tablet. So is that more visible? Is it easier to type on? Can we use talk to text? We don't really care about your grammar. We don't really care about the spelling and those kinds of things. Like, don't nitpick any of that because it can be hard to type, especially if it's kind of a off to the side thing. But are we getting the right information? And how can we make it easier to capture that? So I think that's really important. And I think that it's always really important. And I think even to impress upon our younger generations coming in is the wealth of knowledge and experience and that sort of thing that our our more experienced, more seasoned employees have, and allowing them to share that if that's in their comfort zone, but allowing the people who have been doing this for a long time to act as mentors, to be seen and respected for their work experience and their knowledge. Because I think that sometimes, especially, and I mean, we see it in safety too, right? You come out of school and you're like, yeah, I know everything and I've got it all. And then, we tend to, have some learning experiences along the line, and then that might shift a little in how we view that. And, but recognizing again that humans are going to be human, they're going to act in certain ways. So how do we encourage everybody to kind of see each other for the value that we bring together, and integrate that and make sure that we lean on our more experienced people to help mentor. Quite often, my favorite thing is when I run into like an apprentice. I'm like, hey, you're at the beginning of this career. What are you excited about? What have people shared with you? What are you learning about? What do you need? Like, what do you see? Like, there's always there's so much in that, right? And quite often they'll say like, oh yeah, the older guys tell me, never lift with your back. Make sure you do these things. Always use the extra support so that you don't lug things around and end up with a bad back or a bad shoulder, those kinds of things. And I'm like, yeah, that's really great that they're sharing that with you because that wasn't always the advice. And now, unfortunately, there's some consequences that wasn't always the advice. And so I always say we want everybody to go into retirement standing upright, healthy and well to go enjoy the next phase of their life. Like this career shouldn't take that from you. That's not the consequence. That's not the outcome that's desired for having a physically demanding job for decades. So I love to see that between generations and how they share. And I'm like, oh, yeah, who you should ask over there? You should go ask Joe. Joe has been doing this forever and he can tell you all about that. I'm not the expert in this. He is, but, maybe make that connection and then, you know, make sure that people who are in the workplace who might not be as comfortable with maybe new technology still make sure that their value is celebrated in what they know and what they bring to the table.
Of that. And it makes so much sense building that institutional knowledge, right? How many thousands and thousands and thousands of hours has been collected and are we not tapping into, right? I mean, it's just missing potential. And like you said, some of these people have been at the organization for 10, 20, however many decades, right? And
He's retiring at 50 years next month. Like it's bananas. It's amazing. Just incredible.
congratulations to them, right?
Yes, I know. Isn't that incredible?
And still standing upright, right? Yeah, there we go. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think just kind of back to the micro learning and the short attention span too. Quite often there's kind of like this efficiency mindset that comes out of that, and like, oh, I don't need to read the whole instructions. I've got the gist of it, and they might miss the nuance of like, this is why we do this on this side or whatever. So like there's again that experience can be relayed down of maybe it's not efficient to skip the step or efficient to take away some of the precautions that are in place, or there's a reason that we do 8 steps instead of 6. It's not efficiency, it's not quicker, it's not going to be um, valued to skip the steps. And I think that, again, that more seasoned crew is really great at making sure that our younger workers are aware of that.
And make it when you think about, I mean, as a young guy myself, I'm always tempted to get the groceries in one run, right? Like that in that same kind of vein, right? Especially when you're in a new organization, you want to do things as quickly as possible to really stand out and show that you're willing to go above and beyond. And everyone understands that, but at a certain point, the more experienced individuals might see, oh, I used to do that, and I see where that kind of led me astray, right? Huh.
And again, the humans being human, we can look at those newer, younger workers, and it's such good intention. It's not that they're trying to hurt themselves or trying to wear themselves out or create a chronic issue. Like it's not, that's not the motivation. It's that they're trying to be impressive. They're trying to show that they're engaged. Yeah, it's a really fun time.
It is absolutely. And I appreciate you taking the time today to run us through everything. Ashley, this was phenomenal. You've got a ton of insights, lots for me to think about today. Where can people find your work, what you're up to, and yeah, where can people find that?
LinkedIn, that's where I am professionally. So love new connections on LinkedIn, love following other people's content and getting, seeing what's going on with out in different industries or different innovations that are happening. Always happy to have a chat. I have people who reach out about all kinds of things and I so appreciate that. Love to help where I can.